Welcome into the CBS Sports Network. You're watching the only show to cover the game of basketball all the way from the recruiting trail to the NBA draft. But today we've got a college basketball centric show. Joining me are my colleagues Eric Bossi, Travis Branham, and Isaac Trotter. And on today's show, over the course of the next 60 minutes, we are going to dig through the Power Five conferences in college basketball. Some call it the Power Four plus the Big East. We're going Power Five today. And we're going to answer some key questions. The regular season is going to be over for everybody in the next 72 hours. So we're going to go through, and all four of us are going to name our player of the year, our coach of the year, our freshman of the year, and then we're going to get a little creative. We're going to talk about our best transfer of the year, the most improved player, meaning who was retained and just got better, because retention is one of the least appreciated things in college basketball. And then what am I forgetting? The defensive player of the year. Did I say that? We're going to do all of that. And up first is the Big 12. Now, right off the bat, let's talk about the ones that were the consensus. Everyone has Tommy Lloyd as the coach of the year. They have A.J. Dybantsa as the freshman of the year. Where there is some disagreement is whether or not A.J. Dybantsa is the player of the year in the Big 12. And at the risk of not wanting to anger BYU fans who attack me on social media, Trotter, I'm going to go to you first to make the case for why A.J., the leading scorer in Division I basketball, is the Big 12 player of the year.
Well, injuries have certainly played a part of this. I think JT Toppin at Texas Tech would have been the player of the year if he was able to stay healthy. But A.J. Dybantsa has been the most unguardable player in the Big 12 this year. He has scored at all three levels at a really, really high rate. He's answered questions from three-point range as a knockdown three-point shooter. He gets to the rim whenever he wants. His mid-range fadeaway is nuts. And to lead the country in scoring, it was just too hard for me to overlook, even though there are so many good players in this league. I felt like A.J. has been the most dominant and the best all-around player, even admitting that BYU's under 500 record in the Big 12 is certainly a diss against Dybantsa's case for player of the year.
All right, now Bossi was with you. You mentioned the injury to Toppin, but that injury wasn't enough to dissuade Trav. So Trav, why are you still going with JT Toppin as your Big 12 player of the year?
Yeah, a big part of it is actually what Trotter just mentioned, is the regression in BYU heading in towards this final week of regular season play. JT Toppin was impacting the game at an elite level on both ends, playing the best basketball of his career. And Texas Tech was beating many of the best teams in the country and were on track to be a Final Four contender this March. So to me, taking away and penalizing a guy that played such elite basketball on both ends of the court that impacted winning at the end of the day, I just don't think he should be penalized. So for me, he is my Big 12 player of the year.
All right, now we should know, this is a little different. Like in the NBA, you have to play 65 games in order to be eligible for these rules. In the Big 12, unless there's something I'm unaware of, there is no game requirement. But one of the races that I think is particularly interesting in this conference, because I think you could make an argument they have two, if not three, of the best defenders in the entire country, is DPOY, the Defensive Player of the Year. Bossi, I'm going to start with you. Who was your pick for this award in the Big 12?
So I'm going with Mo Crevis at Arizona. It was a tough one, I think. Up until 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said Flory Bidunga at Kansas, but Mo is finishing the season out stronger. Flory's had a couple off games here recently. And I just love what he does. You know, if you look at somewhere like just Ken Palm, some of his things don't blow you away. You know, he's top 70 in block rate. He's top 150 in defensive rebounding. Those aren't crazy, but it's what you get when you see him on the floor. Arizona's defense is 15 points per 100% per 100 possessions better when he's on the floor. Teams shoot just 39% on twos and only 45% around the rim. That guy is an absolute wall on the back end of that defense. He does his job, and he does it at elite level. And that's not even getting into all the shots that he deters, which is really hard to account for. But if you watch them, you see that he stops a lot of stuff at the rim and really allows their guards to be aggressive and physical.
All right, now, Trav, both you and, Trotter also had Krivas, so that's the winner here by vote. But Trav, you again had kind of the contrarian opinion here. You're going with Flory. What is the case for Flory Bidunga as the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, the show would be boring if we're all sitting here talking about the exact same player or the exact same coach. But yeah, Flory what he brings defensively just pops off the charts. His versatility, his ability to move around the perimeter and block shots at the rim. This guy has proven to be not only, in my opinion, the best defender in the Big 12, but arguably one of the best defenders in the entire country.
I'm going to say this. I think you can summarize this by saying if you're looking for like the drop coverage wall inside, Krivas is your guy. If you're looking for the most mobile big who can guard pick and rolls in the most amount of ways or scramble, then you're going to be in the Bidunga camp. I also want to give a quick shout out, although none of you guys voted for him. Ivan Karchenkov at Arizona is phenomenal on the defensive end as well, and probably the best perimeter defender in this class. He's started on the wing all year long for Arizona. When Koa Pete went down, he slid over. He played some minutes at the 4, but he also guards the best opposing perimeter player, whether that's Darren Peterson or whoever the case may be. So this guy's phenomenal defensively, and I think those three guys, Krivas, Bidunga, and Karchenkov, are as good of a 3 defenders as you'll find anywhere in the country, and that's a really intriguing race. All right, so right now we've got Dybantsa 2-1 as the player of the year in the Big 12. Krivas 2-1 as the defensive player in the year. There's a clear-cut favorite for most improved, and that is Christian Anderson. Trotter talked a lot about JT Toppin already. This was the dynamic duo for Texas Tech, but Anderson has continued to step up, and there hasn't been quite as much slippage as some might have thought after Toppin's injury. So what is the case for Christian Anderson as the Big 12 most improved player?
Yeah, I mean, Christian Anderson has created more points this year than any player in college basketball. 1,193 points off of his shots, his assists, or his passes that resulted in a shooting foul. It's one of the most insane stats that I can find. He's been unbelievable. He's one of the elite pick and roll scorers and creators. If you go back in the Synergy database, no player has ever averaged more points per game in pick and rolls than Christian Anderson. Like, he's just having an all-time type of year. And I think he's just answered the bell. Like last year was like, oh, he's a really nice freshman who can come in and just like kind of be a nice shot maker, instant offense. This year he's showing like he can run a team at a really, really high level. He's been awesome. I honestly thought about him like seriously for Big 12 Player of the Year.
Yeah, I didn't vote, but I'm not sold. I don't know that voters are going to go for Dybantsa if BYU doesn't turn around their season. So that's going to be an interesting one, and I wonder if Anderson get some votes in that race as well. Bossy, I want to ask you about David Punch, because he's someone that, listen, Trav, you voted for Christian Anderson too, but I know behind the scenes we've talked about the TCU forward quite a bit. Bossy, he got your vote. Tell us why he deserves some national recognition for the jump he's made this year.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a TCU team that now is in pretty good chance to make the NCAA tournament, and a big part of that is Punch and what he does. He's pretty much doubled his production across the board from his freshman year. He's averaging 13.6 points, 6.7 rebounds, 2 blocks per game. He anchors that defense. They're 20-10. He's efficient. He's not that big in terms of height. He's only 6'7" or so, but he's a mountain of a man who plays physically, sets the tone on both ends of the floor for those guys. And I totally get the argument for Christian Anderson because he's been fantastic. But I think when I look at who is the most improved, I think Anderson's skill set, while he's definitely improved, is very similar to what it was last year. He's just playing on a team where the dynamics have changed and they now need him to do some different things. And he's getting to showcase a little bit more of what he's had. In Punch, I think that he's also getting more time, but he has clearly improved across the board. He's gotten more skilled. He's gotten much more aware on the defensive end, and he's turned into a leader. And it's those things, the pure improvement, that made me lean his direction.
No, I'm with you on that argument. I think to your point, like especially after the FIBA games this summer, Christian Anderson was expected to be one of the best point guards in college basketball. He's lived up to that, and Punch has really made a name for himself. The most debated of these categories in the Big 12 was who is the best transfer. And there's a lot of different ways you can interpret this question. You could just say, hey, who's the best player among all the transfers? You could say, who's the best value? You each had different answers. So we're just going to go around the horn. Trotter, you first. Who is your best transfer in the Big 12?
Mine's Melvin Council from Kansas. You know, the numbers are great, 13, 5, and 5, but I think the emotional aspect of it, he's turned into the leader of this Kansas team. He plays with unbelievable amount of emotion. It matters to him to play at Kansas. Kansas has really embraced him as well. And this is a guy who was like at St. Bonaventure the year before, Wagner the year before that. Like, he's a nobody, and he's turned into one of the most valuable players for a Kansas team that's one of the biggest brands in college basketball. So to find this guy, to be searching for a point guard like this, to find someone like this who can impact winning on every level of the floor, like in a year where the Big 12 transfer have honestly been a big disappointment, Melvin Council's been just a breath of fresh air.
I'm with you. Trav, who you got? Best Big 12 transfer?
Yeah, talking about a guy coming out of nowhere, it's Cameron Carr at Baylor. He rode the bench for 2 years at Tennessee, transferred to Baylor last winter. And since his arrival on campus, I mean, he's kind of taken the Big 12 by storm in a way, and all of us by surprise. He was a player that Bossy talked quite a bit about in high school, just how talented, how much upside he possessed. But after riding the bench, you had no idea what kind of player he was. And he has exploded at Baylor, averaging over 16 a game, nearly 2 stocks a game. So this is a two-way wing with explosive athleticism and three-level scoring. To me, he's been arguably the biggest surprise in the transfer portal just because of how big of a mystery he was, but also a breakout star in the Big 12.
And also someone, to Bossy's credit, who I think lived up to the long-term potential we saw in high school, which is why we ranked him as high as we did. And now, 2 or 3 years later, putting it all together. Bossy, your best Big 12 transfer?
I tell you what, nobody in this on this show or in the country who covers basketball saw UCF coming. They're 20-9. They're heading to the NCAA tournament. And the biggest reason that I think is their transfer point guard, Themis Fulks. On his 4th stop in college basketball, most recently in Milwaukee, before that, Louisiana and South Carolina State, he is the unquestionable leader for this UCF team. 14.4 points a game, 6.9 assists a night. That 6.9 assists is second in the Big 12. He's among the top 20 nationally in assist rate. He's just a rock. He doesn't turn the ball over. Now, he doesn't shoot it that much from deep, but when he does take a three, he's pretty reliable on that. But just the way that guy handles the ball and handles that team, it's a pretty funky team. I think I say this in a nice way. They're a little bit of a misfit team with a lot of guys who've been cast off from other places and haven't quite found their right fit. And miraculously, it's all come together at UCF. And I think the biggest reason is Fulks and what he's done engineering and leading that team.
That's all right. We're a bunch of misfits over here, too, just hanging out on Friday, 1 o'clock. All right, there you have it. AJ Dybantsa, Matthias Krivas, Christian Anderson, Melvin Council, and Tommy Lloyd are the big winners in the Big 12. We'll be back right after this to do the Big 10, coming up on the CBS Sports Network. We're talking postseason awards here on the show, and up next, we're going to do the Big 10. Now, there's a lot of consensus for 3 major awards. Everyone believes that Yaxel Lendeborg is the Defensive Player of the Year. All 3 of you believe that Jeremy Fears is the most improved player, and all 3 of you believe that Keaton Wagler is the Freshman of the Year in the Big 10. This is where it gets interesting, though. Each of you voted for a different one of those 3 for the Player of the Year in the Big 10. So there's quite a bit of disagreement. Trotter, I'm going to start with you. You've got Yaxel as the Player of the Year. Again, all 3 of you had him as the Defensive Player of the Year. What's the case that he's the most valuable player in the Big 10?
Just probably the best two-way player that impacts the game in the most ways for the best team in the country. So that's kind of sums up the Yaxel Lendeborg case for Michigan. I think he's turned into the Elijah Martin of Michigan basketball. At 6'9", like, he picks up opposing guards all 94 feet. He can rebound, he can play make, he can make way more threes. He's awesome in transition. Even though his counting stats aren't on par with previous Big 10 Player of the Year winners, I just think his all-around impact on both ends of the floor was just too much to overlook for a Michigan team that's run away with the league.
All right, I got a quick sidebar going off script here, so I need like the 15-second answer from you. And just tell if I'm wrong, just be like, no, Fink, you're wrong. Is there a case to be made for Morez Johnson in the DPOY conversation, or is it no, Fink, you're wrong?
Absolutely, there's a case. Or a Demara. Both of those guys could be Defensive Player of the Year candidates alongside Yaxel Lendeborg.
All right, fair enough. Let's keep it moving here. We will go over to Trav. Jeremy Fears was your pick again. Everyone voted for him for most improved. Make the case that he is the player of the year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, to me, especially when it comes to his team and what he means to Michigan State, I don't think there's anybody more valuable. You remove Yaxel Lendeborg, yes, he is absolutely elite, but his supporting cast is stronger than anyone else in the country. And so you remove him from Michigan, and they're still probably a top 10 team. But if you remove Jeremy Fears from this Michigan State team, they're more than likely looking at a bubble projection. That's just how much he means, and especially speaks to how much he has evolved offensively. We've always known he's a tremendous floor general with great IQ, feel for the game. He facilitates, makes people better. But his evolution as a scorer, now making shots out to three, along with just being a menace in the paint and on defense, yeah, the dirty plays may be costing him the Big Ten Player of the Year at the end of the day, but just sheer value to their team. I don't know if there's anybody more valuable than Jeremy Fears is to Michigan State.
Bossy, you have talked a lot about Keaton Wagler on this show, but tell us why you think he's the Big Ten Player of the Year.
Well, first of all, Keaton Wagler is from the greatest city in America, Kansas City, like myself. So obviously, I've got a little bit of a attachment there with him being a Kansas City guy. But in all seriousness, I know Travis brought up, what would happen if guys went out. Well, we saw what happened when Kylan Boswell went out for Illinois, and they didn't miss a beat. They're the number one offense in the country, and the number one reason for that is because of Keaton Wagler with his 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 4.3 assists a game, 42% from three. All of that stuff. He's just been magnificent. No matter what they need him to do, he does it. And he's never has an off game. We all saw what he did at Purdue when he put up 46 points. The guy's just been a revelation. He gets to the rim, he gets others involved. And each game it's becoming more and more evident that he is the leader of that team. And they have potential to make a run in March. And much of it has to do with Keaton.
All right. Well, I'm split, guys. I'm very fascinated to see where this one goes. Certainly, Yaxel's got the best player on the best team vote. Trav's point about what would Michigan State be without Jeremy Fears is right on, and Bossy's point about Wagler is fair as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if the voting is split. This is going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. Next one where we have some disagreement is best transfer. Now, as you might suspect, Trotter picked Yaxel for his player of the year, so obviously he's going to pick him as the best transfer. Whether or not you guys were just spreading the love a little bit so we didn't talk about Yaxel ad nauseum, I don't know. But Trav, you went with Bennett Sturts, and I do think there is a very real case to be made and a similar type of philosophy to the one you just articulated about Fears. Like, you take Bennett Sturts off of Iowa, and what are the Hawkeyes? Beyond that, what is your case for Bennett Sturts being the most important transfer in the Big Ten?
I mean, Ben McCollum even talked about it last night, just in terms of what he means in the roster he was able to compile this year. It's not the most talented rosters in the country, but Bennett Sturts is just he's what I would call as a force multiplier. He just impacts the game in so many ways and makes teams that are otherwise rather mid actually pretty good and on the tier of an NCAA tournament team. He's an electric scorer, scores from all 3 levels, a potent shot maker. He's tough as nails, gets anywhere he wants to on the court, a great passer with an elite IQ and feel for the game. And then he's really tough on the defensive end of the floor. He's really good getting into the gaps and being tough on the ball. This kid just impacts winning in the highest of ways. And so if you remove him from that Iowa team, and they are very far on the outside of the NCAA tournament bubble.
Bossy, you went with a selection which I think if we were dubbing this the best value transfer, he'd be the runaway pick. Who did you go with?
Well, I went with Nick Boyd, and I was dangerously close to going with Bennett Sturts too, another Kansas City area native, by the way. But I think we need a little bit of variety. And also, I really think that there's a reason that Wisconsin is where they are at 21-9 and top 5 in the Big Ten. And that's Nick Boyd. Like, we knew this guy was good. He did what he did at FAU. He was great there. He was very good at San Diego State last year, but holy cow, this guy has turned things up an entirely new level and makes for one of the most exciting backcourts in the country with John Blackwell. He's averaging 20 points a game, which is well above anything he's ever done before. 3.7 rebounds, 3.9 assists a game. I really think that Wisconsin knew they were getting a solid guy with some experience, but I don't think they or anyone else expected the kind of game changer that he's been for them. And that's why I lean towards them, because I don't know that they would be quite as good as they are right now without him.
And I think, in terms of per dollar value, I'm speculating a little bit, but obviously that was a great eval on. Want to talk a little bit about Coach of the Year. Obviously, Dusty May's Michigan team has been dominant. Trotter, make what seems to be the very obvious case for Dusty May.
It's insane to me that Michigan went undefeated on the road in the Big Ten for the first time since 1975-76. That's insane. So the type of team that Michigan has put together and Dusty May has done is worthy of Big Ten Coach of the Year. You got a lot of heat for the Elliott Cadeau move. You got a lot of heat for the Demara move. You got a lot of heat for stacking all these bigs together. But he was right. And Michigan is one of the most dominant teams that we've seen in recent memory.
And not to mention, those pieces weren't a natural fit in the first few games of the season. I feel like they've showed a lot of growth as the year has gone on as well. Trav, lots of times this award, Coach of the Year, can go to the coach of the team that is perceived to have overachieved the most. And I think your pick of Fred Hoiberg would be characteristic with that type of philosophy.
No question. I mean, look at the Nebraska program and the history of it when it comes to basketball. They've never seen this type of success in quite some time. And it's going back to the UCF topic. It's kind of a roster compiled of a bunch of misfits, guys that were outcasts from other programs, Berkey, Bayou, Tunkel, or Price, Sanford, Iowa, who had to find a new home. And frankly, when we were scouting and evaluating the portal last year and talking about the Iowa transfers, we had him rate him the lowest. And now he's become one of the best players in the entire Big Ten. So what Fred Hoiberg has done in compiling this roster and succeeding at an extremely high level with it is just unprecedented. It's truly remarkable. And you compare it to what Michigan's done. They have arguably the best roster in the entire country. And that's not to discredit what Dusty May is, because that's part of coaching. And that's what I think they get discredited for the most is head coaches compile rosters and they should receive credit for it. But to me, Fred Hoiberg is just simply deserving of this award this year.
All right, I'm with you. Coming up next, we are going to outlaw the word misfit for the next 30 minutes of this show. We're also going to talk about the SEC and the ACC. Don't go anywhere. That's right here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Network, where we are breaking down postseason award winners, some typical awards, some more creative awards. We're going to talk the SEC and the ACC in this segment. That's because they are both characterized very similarly by a dominant freshman who is the unanimous choice for our voters here as both the Player of the Year and Freshman of the Year. Of course, I'm talking about Darius Acuff in the SEC and Cameron Boozer in the ACC. Couple other players who were consensus in the SEC. Todd Golden, he's not a player, the Coach of the Year, and then Ruben Chignello, who we talked a lot about on last week's show. You can go back and find that on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. He got all three of your votes for DPOY, Defensive Player of the Year. Where there was a little bit of disagreement was on Most Improved. And honestly, I was a little surprised because I thought this would be consensus as well. Tyler Tanner would have been my vote for the Most Improved Player. Bossy, you and Trotter both had him. Trotter, what's the case for Tyler Tanner as the Most Improved Player in the SEC?
Pound for pound, maybe the best athlete in the league. Just a 6-foot guard who gets by every single player that stays in front of, tries to stay in front of him, can finish above the rim at a really high level. His production has basically tripled. He's gone from a 3-star no-name recruit to maybe a first-team All-SEC guy, maybe a first-round pick eventually down the road. He's been the heart and soul of a much-improved Vanderbilt team.
Bossy, anything to add to that? Because you had him as well.
Yeah, we're talking about a top 15 offense and a top 30 defense nationally, and he is the guy who leads it on both ends of the floor. Just something about a kid, we're talking these days about in the transfer portal about guys who really play for the name on their chest and for the love of the school. And I don't know there's anyone out there who loves their university as much as Tyler Tanner loves Vanderbilt and playing for Vanderbilt. When they went through a coaching change, they couldn't shake him. He wanted to be there, and boy, was Mark Byington and his staff glad they went ahead and kept a hold of him.
Trev, you've got LeBaron Philon. Obviously, the offensive jump has been significant. I'm sure you're going to talk about that. My contention is he was a whole lot more interested in defending last year, but admittedly, that perception is kind of rooted in when I saw him live at the beginning of the year. So, what's the case for LeBaron?
Yeah, he's nearly doubling his production over a year ago, and it's one of those kids that you want to reward. Like we were talking about him as a potential first rounder early last season in his freshman year, and then he kind of plateaued as the season went on, and then coming back this year, he's just exploded, and to me, been one of the best guards in the entire SEC. He scores it from all three levels. He's extremely dynamic with the ball in his hands, and if you need him to take a game over, he's shown that time and time again this year. And when it comes down to the last possession, as he showed against Tennessee, that's the guy you want the ball in his hands. And so seeing his growth, and not only his growth as a player, but just betting on himself and coming back, returning to Alabama, he's turned into one of the best guards in the SEC. And so to me, he is the most improved player.
All right, so that is 2-1. Tyler Tanner for the most improved player in the SEC. LeBaron Philon second in that voting. Let's talk best transfer now. This is another one where there were two people who got one player who got two votes. That was Jacoby Gillespie at Tennessee. Trotter, you and Trav both went with him. What is the case for Jacoby as the best transfer in the conference?
Yeah, he has just become indispensable for Tennessee. He plays defense. He takes tough assignments on that end. But I think it's the offensive growth. Like, I think there's a little bit less talent at Tennessee than what he had last year at Maryland when he had, Derek Queen and Rodney Rice and Juju Reese. But his numbers have been terrific. His playmaking has been better. His assist to turnover ratio has been better. And year after year, it feels like Tennessee just spawns an awesome transfer guard. It was Dalton Knecht 2 years ago, Chaz Lanier a year ago, and now Jacoby Gillespie this season. He is one of the best guards in the country and gives you a chance to win every single night when Jacoby Gillespie is on your team.
Shout out Juju Reese. Great reference. You see, he got in the game for the Wizards last night and had 20 rebounds. Great reference, Trotter. I bet you did that on purpose. Bossy, you went with a different choice for the best transfer in the SEC, although it was someone who followed his coach in Dalen Swain at Texas.
Yeah, and you know what? I was very close to pulling the trigger on Jacoby Gillespie too, but in my estimation, I think Tennessee would still find a way to be a tournament team if they lost Jacoby Gillespie. If you took Dalen Swain off of this Texas team, they're not even on the bubble that they're on now. They're in a potentially in a dark place. 17.7 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.2 assists, over 55% shooting as the number one guy on the scouting report, who's really kind of found a way to play. He's not one of these guys who takes a ton of threes or anything like that, but boy, he's found a way to finish at the rim, find ways to score with efficiency. And like I said, just how much he matters to this Texas team coming over with Sean Miller in the first year is what kind of put him over the edge for me, or put him over the finish line first when it comes to the most valuable transfer.
All right, so wrapping up the SEC, Darius Acuff is both our player of the year and freshman of the year. Ruben Chignello is the defensive player of the year. Tyler Tanner, most improved. Jacoby Gillespie, best transfer. And Todd Golden, the coach of the year. Going to shift to the ACC. We already said Cameron Boozer, like Acuff, both the player of the year and freshman of the year in the ACC. Most improved, you guys each had a different answer, and they were three players that we've already talked about on this show, so we're going to be a little more succinct here. Bossy, you went with Paul McNeil. Trotter, you went with Juke Harris. Trav, you went with Isaiah Evans. Bossy, you first. Why was Paul McNeil your guy here?
Man, he's a guy that when we saw early in his high school career, looked like he could be a potential big-time guy, kind of stalled out a little bit and had, frankly, a poor freshman year, but boy, he's flourished under Will Wade. He's making over 41% of his threes, and he's taking over 7 of them a game, 13.6 points up from 4.3 as a freshman. It's hard for me to vote against that guy as the most improved player in the league.
Trotter, case for Juke Harris.
Just to the emergence from like a really nice, like plucky role player as a freshman to a flat out dude as a sophomore. Like, he is the total engine of that Wake Forest offense. He can make plays for himself. He makes plays for others. His pull-up game is nasty. Like, as I'm kind of thinking of like the top 10 wings in college basketball, Juke Harris has become one of those, and his production has tripled for a Wake Forest team. Like, they're really talented. I know it hasn't really worked out this year, but his talent goes par for anybody, and he can go band for band with some of the top scorers in this league.
And remember, Juke Harris was in December inserted onto the CBS Sports NBA Draft Big Board. He's right around the end of the first round, so he's going to have a decision to make here in a couple of months. Trav, your case for Isaiah Evans at Duke.
Yeah, I've been watching Isaiah Evans since he was 15 years old, and he's continued to evolve his game over the past 5 years. And now this season, he's made a massive jump to me. If you watched him as a freshman at Duke, you saw the shot making. However, he was a defensive liability, and all he did was just hunt, catch, and shoot jumpers. This year, he has completely evolved, and he is bringing a full, well-rounded game to this Duke team that now ranks as the #1 team in the country. He impacts game positively now on both ends of the court. He's really matured defensively, and then offensively, he is still a prolific and potent shot maker from three. But now he's putting the ball on the deck, getting downhill, getting to the free throw line, and making some pull-up jump shots. And also, he's now become a late go-to option for Duke. Historically, they've always gone to their #1s, whether it be Cooper Flagg last year, Paulo Banchero years ago. Now he's become that second option for them, and we've seen it utilized throughout the course of the year.
Three sound arguments there. The other Duke player to mention is that Dame Sarr was the consensus defensive player of the year. That's another player talked about on this show and his role in turning them into a real defensive juggernaut. Guys, quickly, best transfer. Trav, you and Trotter both had Henry Vasar at North Carolina. Trotter, what is the case there? It ain't his defense, I'll say that.
Just the emergence offensively as a pick and pop threat, and he can really make plays off the bounce. He started to deck it and drive long closeouts at a really high level. I would push back a little bit on his defense. I think some of the perimeter defenders put him in some bad spots on the back end, but I feel like North Carolina's gotten everything and then some that they wanted out of Henry Vasar so far this year.
Bozzy, I'm going to ask you a two-parter here because we were split on transfer and coach. Tell me about the Malik Reneau, Jay Lucas tandem here because they both got votes for best transfer and best coach, and they've done it together this year at Miami.
Yeah, wow. What a duo. We'll start with Malik Reneau, 19.1 points, 6.7 rebounds, 2.2 assists a game. You know, when you're a young coach like Jay Lucas who's putting a team together from scratch, finding seniors isn't a big deal because the transfer can find them, but finding one who can be a leader and really be a guy to rally around and a focal point for your team and have the maturity to do that, Malik Reneau has been that guy for him. He's been everything they need, not just as a scorer, but like I said, as that senior, a guy who's been through the fire to kind of draw everyone together and keep them on the same page. Now, we talk about Jay Lucas. What more could anyone have possibly expected him to do? I know when he got hired, we talked recruiting, young, has connections. Also supposed to be a pretty good defensive coach, but we'll see what happens when he get on the floor. Well, here we are with a Miami team that's 24-6, 13-4 in the ACC. Jay Lucas has backed up that reputation of being a good defensive coach. They've got a top 30 defense in the country. They've also got a top 50 offense. I just think that, you know, the hardest thing for a young coach to do is to shed that, you know, the so-called recruiter label. And he's done that really quick and made Miami a force to be reckoned with. And that's why, as much as I think John Shire is going to be deserving of the ACC Coach of the Year and will likely win it, I still would not give my nod to Jay Lucas just because of what he's done in this first year is so far ahead of what anyone could have expected from him.
All right, so our ACC award winners, Cameron Boozer, Player of the Year and Freshman of the Year, Dame Sarr, Defensive Player of the Year, Henry Vasar 2-1 is the best transfer. We are split on most improved. I'm going to break the tie for Paul McNeil because of his impact on winning. And then John Shire 2-1 over Jay Lucas for Coach of the Year. Don't go anywhere. We're coming back with the Big East. That's next on the CBS Sports Network. We are breaking down the best players, the best coaches, the best defensive players of the year, freshmen. What else we got? We're doing it all right here for every major conference. And right now it is the Big East. Now, the interesting thing about the Big East is when I asked everyone to vote, they all gave me the same names, but for different awards. So Zuby Ejiofor and Silas Demery came up in very different places. Some guys voted for him for Defensive Player of the Year. Some guys voted for the other one for Player of the Year. Other guys switched it. Everyone voted for Silas for best transfer. Trotter, make the case to me for Silas to start, whether it's for player of the year, defensive player of the year. Sell me on why Silas Demery is the guy.
It's an interesting case because I don't want to diss Zuby at all in this conversation. I just think Silas's value to a UConn team that I still think is the best team in the Big East is pretty backed up by fact. Like, their offense is 16 points per 100 possessions better with Silas Demery on the floor against top 100 teams. That's not nothing. And then you factor in the hustle plays, the defense, the rim pressure, his pull-up jumpers. He creates shots for them at the end of shot clocks. He gets them involved in stuff. He gets them good shots. Like, he's just super valuable. And he plays with great size, great motor, great toughness. He's been like a perfect fit for what they wanted. And their point guard play was such an issue last year. Now it's become arguably a strength of their team. And Silas Demery is like the major catalyst for all of it.
Yeah, I think he's single-handedly changed their defense. You think about it, they returned 3 starters from last year on a team that had defensive issues, and then they added a freshman. So Silas really is the difference. And I'm so glad you brought up the rim pressure, because he really does give you someone who can get 2 feet in the paint on demand when needed. The other candidate is obviously Zuby. Basi, make that case.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was really nervous about debating with Trotter on this one because I was definitely bringing a knife to a gunfight when it comes to nerd stats, but he went a little easy on that. I'm going to go with more of a vibe check feel here. Obviously, what Zuby's doing, his numbers speak for themselves. Almost 16 points, 7 rebounds, nearly 4 assists per game. But here they are tied with UConn at number 1 in the Big East. And I know Silas Demery is awesome, but I just look at that UConn team and the level of maturity they have top to bottom on that roster. I feel like if you took Silas off of them, they would still find a way to be winning and competing for a conference title. If you take Zuby away from that St. John's team, not only the production you lose, but just the maturity that they lose. I don't know that that's the most mature team that's built the kind of record that they have. And a lot of that is because of Zuby and what he does. So with him being a threat from 3 now, also being an incredible defender, they're top 15 defense in the country. He anchors that. That's why I lean towards Zuby, just because of what he means, not only statistically, but just as a presence in that locker room and where I think St. John's would be without him compared to where UConn would be without Demery.
It's a very fair point, and I'm just appreciative that you got through it without using the word misfit, because I felt like it was coming there at one point. Now, what surprised me in this voting was that there was a consensus for freshman of the year, and that's Nigel James at Marquette. So, Trav, why is he apparently the obvious choice for Big East freshman of the year? But spoiler alert, I'm gonna have a point after this is over.
I'm imagining you're going to go with Braylon Mullins, but yeah, Nigel James has easily been the top freshman in the league this year. Yes, Marquette has had a dreadful season, but it's not because of Nigel. Nigel is impacting the game in an elite way on both ends of the court. He's really evolved. We've watched him closely throughout his entire high school career, and we've always known 2 things. He is small, yes, but this kid is tough as nails, and he brings it every single night. And I think his evolution as a scorer has really been mind-boggling this year. He's shooting nearly 38% from 3, something he historically is not great at. I think the free throw percentage is a bit indicative of that, shooting below 70%. But his wiggle with the ball, his quickness, his toughness, what he brings on defense has just been immense. And so I think, to me, it's a no-brainer that Nigel James is the freshman of the year.
I have no argument with any of that except for the no-brainer part, because Braylon Mullins, whose counting stats are not as good, but his impact on winning, his draft projection, which I get is not the basis for this award, and the fact that, like, you take Braylon Mullins off UConn and they lose at least 2 more games. They lose the Kansas game and they lose the Providence game. You could make the argument that his shot making was the biggest difference in those games. And I just think contextually it's vastly different from a Marquette team that it was very clear early on in the season that they were playing not by choice, but for the future. This was not an NCAA tournament team. UConn's been fighting for number 1 seed all season long. Braylon Mullins started the season on the injured list, and his return has brought them to new levels. So I will be surprised if the vote is this swayed in Nigel James's direction. And that's taking nothing away from Nigel because he's been awesome. Most improved. Basi, you went with Terrace Reed here. Is he from Kansas City?
No, he's from a place with far inferior barbecue, St. Louis, but I'm not going to hold that against him because he has been awesome for UConn this year. A one-game starter last year after transferring over from Michigan. He started all 25 of his games this year, and they went through the stretch early in the season, if you remember, when he was out with injury, where they were still winning for the most part. They did lose to Arizona, but they were still winning, but they didn't quite look like a UConn team. And, Eric Ribe was doing some nice things on the interior, but had some moments of, question. But Reed's just been a rock for them. Nearly 14 points, 8 rebounds, 2.2 blocks per game for a guy who's really not the springiest guy. He's a positional defender who builds a wall around the rim and takes up a lot of space on the interior. But also, what the thing about that I love about Taurus Reed is what he does as a playmaker. That guy is a sneaky good passer. He sees cutters, he sees shooters. 2.2 assists a game out of your center is a really big deal to me. And I just think that the improvement he's made over the last couple of years, he's gone from a guy that people kind of snickered, like, how was that guy ranked in the top 40 in high school, to now a guy that I think is being overlooked as an NBA prospect, not just as a great college basketball player.
He is on the CBS Sports Big Board, and I will add he has a 7'5" wingspan, which is relevant for NBA standards as well. Trotter, you went with Tyler Perkins at Villanova. What's your case there for him as the most improved player in the Big East?
Yeah, he was at 6 points a game last year, and he's basically zoomed up to 16 points a game, even with a Villanova backcourt that has a lot of different mouths to feed. Sometimes it can be a Caden Lewis, sometimes it can be Devin Askew, but I think there's a lot of times where Perkins has been their most valuable player. He takes the toughest assignments on defense. He can pass, dribble, shoot. He's got a great shot fake. He gets defenders up in the air, gets fouled shooting a three like every time I watch Villanova play. And he's just plays off 2 feet. He is like the prototypical Villanova guard from the past, and they've reincarnated it a little bit here with Perkins. And for a guy that transferred from Penn, he's turned into a way better Big East player than I think a lot of people initially thought when he hit the portal.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Let's talk Coach of the Year. Trav, you went Shaheen Holloway, and Trotter, you were with him, right? With Shaheen?
Yeah, but I think Shaheen Holloway has been my Coach of the Year too.
Trav, give me the rationale for Shaheen as the with 2 of the 3 votes here.
Yeah, he didn't have the greatest season last year, and so he rebuilt this roster. And I'm going to use the word with misfits, guys that you didn't anticipate coming into the Big East and having a massive impact. Adam Clark being the headline of it. He's small, but this kid is tough as nails. He fits exactly what Shaheen Holloway values in a player. And they are really disrupting the Big East all season long. You've seen what they've done to UConn and just give them trouble in both of their games. And so to me, Shaheen, when you're talking about resources and ability to evaluate, or not evaluate, but get top players out of the transfer portal, rather, he went and got guys who are undervalued and underappreciated, and he's really turned things around this year.
Bossy, you went with Dan Hurley, which is an argument that I think kind of makes itself at this point. There was no Rick Pitino vote. There was also no Kevin Willard vote, which I found interesting because I think he's done an incredible job year 1 at Villanova. I think, Trotter, you called him the perennial floor raiser when we talked the Big East in December, and I think that's right on. All right, you can head on over after we are done and look back on all these awards. We broke down every major conference in college basketball, but don't go anywhere yet. I've got one more shot coming up right here on the CBS Sports Network. Barring something very unexpected this weekend, there's going to be a significant change in the CBS Sports NBA Draft Big Board on Monday morning. But if you don't want to wait until Monday morning, you can come right back here, the CBS Sports Network, at 10 after 3 today, as Gary Parrish and I will be talking some college basketball and NBA draft. Until then, head over to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. You can watch all our past shows, as well as GP, Matt Norlander, John Rothstein, and many of my other friends. Until then, we will see you real soon.